Homosexuality. That's what this video is going to be about. Now, I don't really like talking about this topic because it kind of makes me feel a little bit grimy. But somebody requested it in the comments, so that's what we're going to do. Shankz8854. Qualified by me as a homosexual. That's what I think. That's the reason he's interested in this. Otherwise, why would you be? But anyway, he said to me, as a Christian, how do I feel about the fact that we have to stone gays to death? And I said, I don't think we have to stone gays to death. I think you just invented that. Then he said, well, it's bad. You shouldn't like it. And I said, please provide a source reference and a verse from the Bible, which is where you've got this from, presumably. And then we'll go by what the Bible actually says rather than what you think it says. So he said Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13, and that's cool. We can work with that. So let's go through it, and we'll go through what the Bible actually means, so you can understand that. You also ask how I feel about it as a Christian, so we'll also go through that. Yeah, let's just do that first because it's going to be a little bit awkward for some of you. So first of all, Leviticus 18:22. This is God speaking to the Hebrew Israelites with the commands of how they should form their culture. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, for it is an abomination in my sight. That's the whole verse. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. So what he's saying is, don't have sex with men the way that you should be having sex with your wife. A woman. Because it's an abomination. Abomination means makes me feel sick. It's like so abhorrently disgusting and evil and bad. It's basically one of the worst things you can ever do. That's what God said to the Hebrew Israelites. So I think that's fair enough. Now, I'm not saying, if you happen to be a homosexual that I'm going to seek you out for punishment or I'm going to have some kind of view on you. As far as I'm concerned, Shankz8854, what you do in the comforts of your own bedroom or the back of your car or in a pissy alley outside the bar, it's nothing to do with me, okay? These rules are for a culture in the desert with very few people trying to set up as a big town, having just been released as slaves from an enemy nation. Right, so they're in the middle of the desert with no food, no water, very few people. They have to be proactive and efficient and make sure no person or no resource is wasted. Otherwise, they will just die out in the desert. It's a miracle they survived at all, which is why you kind of think, well, maybe it was God then, because you need to have a miracle in that situation, not only to survive, but to flourish into a huge, powerful, multi-million-pound culture with a democracy, who is one of the most powerful countries on earth, considering you started with like 150 people in the desert with nothing. All right, so that's the context. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, for it is an abomination. Why is it an abomination? Do you think God is looking at people's sex lives? Is that how you think this goes, Mr. Shankz? Do you think God is looking at people while they have sex and thinking, well, those ones look pretty. Oh, everyone should be like that. Oh, these ones are ugly. No, they shouldn't be like that. Is that seriously the level of your wit and your thinking towards this? That's what I'd ask you. Or, like what I think, I don't know because you haven't supplied me any information, but what I think is that you are a homosexual and you do this. And because you do this, and you don't like people who don't think this is good, like myself, and you think you can blame that on God, despite the fact you don't believe in him, you think that justifies you to argue with this. Correct? It doesn't at all. It's complete nonsense. Let me tell you why. Cast your minds back many thousands of years to the middle of the desert. You have 150 Israelites, 75 men, 75 women, something like that. Very, very small group. They are rolling around in tents because they got kicked out of their previous home, which was as slaves in Egypt. The reason they got kicked out is because Moses led them across the Red Sea, away from slavery, after the Pharaoh tried and failed to kill them all. And the reason he failed to kill them is because Moses had miracles of God. They would have all been dead otherwise. And if you don't believe this is true, it's also in the Quran. So even if you don't think it's true, millions of Christians think it's true, millions of Jews think it's true, and millions of Muslims, who are our enemies, think it's true. We all think it's true. Plus, Egyptian culture and heritage and history has buildings and shrines and all kinds of stuff that indicates it's true. Abraham has a grave in exactly the site which you'd think it would be in by the rules set through the Bible. That is a real place. Jerusalem, Israel, is a real place, and these rules carried on into today and formed the basis of our modern democratic society from this. So even though you, in your little fleshly desires and your selfish me attitude, thinks, well, I want to have sex with men, so everyone should like having sex with men. Everyone who doesn't like having sex with men, they must be bad. That's you. That's what you're saying. That ends in cultural death. You know why? Because if all men were having sex with only other men, and women were only having sex with other women, guess what would happen in 3 generations' time? Everybody would die out and there would be no children. Not only that, if you weren't so flippin' selfish, you would have figured this out. When you get very old and you can barely stand up or walk on your hind legs, because guess what? You've been ransacking your back passage with aplomb every single day with various different men. When that happens to you and you start getting old and you need to go into a home and have younger people look after you, who is going to be looking after you? Somebody else's children who was straight, who had children. Someone who had a married couple who had children, who put good values in their children, so those children were good people, went to work and gave a crap about people like you when you're old and can't walk. Who is going to be looking after them when they get old? Not your children, because you don't have any, because you have been gay and selfish and you didn't have marriage and kids. You didn't add anything to society. It's all take. Me. Only care about myself. And the only thing you care about is homosexuality. Sodomy. That's literally your main concern here. So that's why you're completely wrong and frankly evil for saying this is bad when you're doing that. The other reason why it's bad. Let's say we do find some people who want to look after your stupid, bloody idiot backside, your ravaged backside when you're old. We find some people who were brought up well in a married family with brothers and sisters, and they all get jobs as carers in an old person's home, and they look after you in your advanced senile years. Who is going to be paying for that? Because it won't be you, because we've already ascertained you're senile old and you can barely stand up. But that takes money to provide a building, to provide wages for the staff to look after you, to provide training, to provide laws and a government and a country and an infrastructure to support you being looked after when you're old and paid for. Who's going to be paying for that? You? No. You don't have any children because you've already said you're homosexual, you wanted to do sodomy and you didn't give a crap about society or anyone else. So somebody has to be paying for you when you're there. Who's it going to be? It's going to be the children of the married straight couples who you are showing such disdain for, who are only there because of the Western culture based on this. You get me? So it's actually you being evil and stupid and psychotic and bad and thoughtless and selfish. Not this, it's you. But because you can't see past your own fleshly desires, which are pretty disgusting if you ask me, that's how I feel about it as a Christian, because you are blinkered by your fleshly desires to have, homosexual relations, you don't even think past the end of the day. You don't think about when you're senile and old, who's going to pay for you, who's going to look after you, who's going to wipe your ravaged backside when you're unable to. Who's going to look after them when they're old? You don't give a crap, do you? All you care about is me now, then you die, done, who cares? Selfish, evil. So that's Leviticus 18:22. As a bonus, I'm going to throw in Leviticus 19:28. This is another one you probably won't like, but it's in there, and I'm going to tell you why it should be in there. Leviticus 19:28. You shall not put cuts upon your body, nor tattoo upon yourselves, for this is shameful. Why would God say you can't cut yourself? Why would God say you can't cut your own body, and that includes having tattoos all on yourself because it's shameful? Why would he say that? Well, because if you have tattoos on you, in the Hebrew Israelite culture, no one was allowed tattoos, which meant if you came across someone with tattoos, it meant they were probably a slave of the Moors, or the Muslims, or the pre-Islamic culture before they were calling themselves Muslims. The Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites and the Molech people had lots of slaves. Who became slaves? The kids who had no fathers. So the ones who lied about having homosexuality as their preference, so they had a wife and they had children, but they didn't give a crap about their family or their children because they were busy going off with their homosexual buddies getting buggered. The children got made into slaves and they had tattoos put on them so that the slave guy could know these ones belong to me. And sometimes these poor unfortunate kids who were sexually abused, by the way, as well as part of the Molech culture, would run away and they would run away to the nearest place where they were offered safety, and they knew they would be looked after well. Guess where that was? It was Israel. Why do you think Israel was the safe spot they would all want to escape to? Because of this. Because you shall not cut your body nor tattoo yourself. So therefore, if you come across someone who has cuts and tattoos on them, and they say, I didn't do this to myself, this was put on me, this is a slave. Now, what happens to slaves in Israelite Hebrew culture? When you find a slave, you have to accept him into your family, spend 5 years trying to help him locate his own family, or not if he doesn't want to, and you have to give him a job and treat him like a son or a daughter. And you teach him the custom of the land. You make him free after he's worked with you for 5 years. So for 5 years, he's your son or daughter. He gets to learn the language, get food every day, get a bed, sleep in, get sandals, clothes, everything you have to pay for. Even though this guy's just turned up and he could be complete psycho, you don't know. He's just a slave with a tattoo on him. But you know he is not anyone's child from here because he has tattoos and cuts on him. That's the only way you're ever going to know that, because you know, it's not like every single person knows each other. It's not like there aren't illegitimate children running about. But you know, tattoo, cut, if they say they didn't do it themselves, this is a slave from the Ishmaelites or the Molechs. And that means you have to do the best for them, look after them, adopt them as your son or daughter, teach them good morals, manners and courtesies so that they can become a productive member of society and hopefully get married and have children to look after your stupid selfish backside when you're too senile and old to look after yourself. Or if not, just pay for the whole operation so you don't have to starve. Do you still think it's bad? Probably, because you seem like a very selfish, thoughtless person. So that's Leviticus 19:28. Then we get on to my favourite one, Leviticus 20, number 13. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both have committed a sin, surely they should be put to death in the sight of the Lord, and their blood is upon themselves. You probably think that's bad, don't you? Well, let me once again tell you why it's absolutely not bad. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both have committed a sin. So what's happening here is a man is lying with his wife and an extra man. So they're all sleeping with each other. And that is a sin. Surely they shall be put to death. So they're not getting killed by the people. This is not saying you shall kill them. This is saying they shall die. They shall be put to death by God. And what happens there is when you're having these weird bisexual, homosexual love triangles, maybe you end up getting venereal disease or AIDS, and then you drop dead. And the Hebrew Israelites, this is like thousands of years ago, they don't know what AIDS is, they don't know what HIV is, but God has told them the reason you got sick and died is because of this bisexual relationship that you're having. That's why it only happens to them. It doesn't happen to married couples. It doesn't happen to chaste people. It doesn't happen to virtuous virgins and, you know, guys that don't act like that. It only seems to happen to homosexual, bisexual triangles. So, God, being that he's wise, says to the Hebrew Israelites, I'm not going to give you a PhD level medical lecture because you won't understand it, and by the way, you're in the middle of the desert trying to survive, so we're going to focus on getting you into a state of being where you're actually a city with walls, with running water, with beds, with no crime, with laws, with a prospect of future. That's the goal. Rather than focusing on homosexuality, how can we okay and justify perversions and homosexuality? That is not on the menu. So, God, in his wisdom, says, here is a rule for you, Hebrew Israelites. If a man lies with a male, as with a female, both have committed a sin. So it's not like the man's getting away with it and it's the woman's fault. It's not like the woman's getting away with it and it's the man's fault. It's not like it's the extra guy's thing and none of them are getting away with it. They're all going to be infected by this thing, potentially, and they don't know if they are or not. Sometimes they'll lie about it if they are. So you really can't trust them at that point now that they have done this. So if they do this, don't speak to them, don't let them hang around with your family, don't consort with them, they shall be put to death by God. And generally, that is what happened. They died of a horrible disease and they were no more. And anyone else who tangled with them and got bodily fluids on them also died. So that's why they call it a curse, and you shall be killed by God, not by the other people. It's not like they were rounding up gays and killing them. Nobody admitted to this stuff. It was sinful and shameful. They were doing it in secret. And when they started to become sickly and dying, and it was very obvious why that was happening, you know, it wasn't exactly an unexplained mystery, when that started happening, people thought, oh, we know why that is, because we've got Leviticus, which is what Leviticus is. Rules and punishment from God. So had people followed this, HIV and AIDS would never be a thing in our society. And that's what we find in the Hebrew Israelite culture. It was virtually non-existent. In fact, it only happened when they stopped following these rules and started accepting the foreign customs, such as those of the Ishmaelites, such as those as the Edomites, such as those as the Sodomites. Guess what happened to those people? They're all dead. Not from Israelites killing them, from God killing them. They all magically died of horrible diseases, or they just dropped dead. So that's what this means. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both have committed a sin, surely they shall be put to death, their blood is upon them. Their blood is upon them means anyone who does this and dies, it's their own fault. So they're not being killed by anyone, they are dying of a disease. And after they die of that disease, when people are saying, oh, isn't that sad they died, how do we prevent that from happening? We don't seem to have an explanation for it. God is saying there is an explanation for it. Their blood is upon themselves. Because they didn't follow this, they thought they were smart, they thought they were clever, they thought we can do what we want, we're selfish and hedonistic, and then they died. So if you think this is good, what you're doing, but not this, then I've got news for you, buddy. I hope that you're wearing protection, and that you are limiting the amount of homosexual sex with the amount of sexual partners you have, not because I care particularly about your sex life, I really don't. But from the evidence of history, and from this, and from my eyeballing observation of reality, HIV and AIDS is primarily a homosexual problem, isn't it? Whereas if you were following this, it would not be a problem. So you and other homosexuals and bisexual atheists and other bisexuals are primarily the reason why HIV and AIDS is spread throughout the West. Whereas if we had all been doing this, it wouldn't have been. We would have none of it. None of those people would be dead, and they would all have happy families. So that when we got old and senile and couldn't stand up properly, and we needed somebody to look after us, we would have those people there. And when that needed to be paid for, we would also have those people there. So in conclusion, Mr. Shankz8854, some of us think that the needs of society and the futures of our children are more important than where my penis is going to end up tomorrow night when I'm drunk. I.e., I think that the progression of society and the assurance of future for children and the assurance for me when I get old, because I've worked my whole life and I don't particularly want to die lonely and starve and freeze because there's no healthcare for me or no one to pay for it. I think in order for me to have a nice retirement, get senile in a home and have my nappies changed and have food and not have to worry about it, that needs younger people to do those jobs and to pay for it. And if I am expecting to take that, you best believe I have children that are going to be contributing to that for them. Otherwise, guess what I am? Selfish and evil. So in conclusion, as a Christian, I 100% agree with every single word of this. I couldn't agree with it any more. And it doesn't mean to say that I don't like gay people, which I know you're going to try and strawman me with. Some of my audience members are gay, by the way. I've got friends in real life who are gay. I had my gay friend around here a couple of weeks ago, and we had a great time. Sat, chatted, watched TV, had some food. Well, he didn't, because he doesn't eat anything when he's out. But it doesn't matter. The point is, he doesn't have a problem with my Christianity. He doesn't have a problem with me believing on this and thinking that this is good. And he would probably agree with me when I said, wouldn't you like to think that your elderly years would be secured by younger people produced from a married couple with good values who are going to do that job, not complain, and there's going to be money made by other young people to pay for that, so you don't have to. I'm absolutely sure he would agree with that. I know he would, because he's my friend. I know him. But guys like you are selfish and thoughtless and, quite frankly, evil, and you do not care a jot about him, me, the next generation of children, or anybody. You don't care about next week, next year. All you care about is me, me, me. Now, now, now. What do I want in the moment? What's my sexual desire? Everything else can go to hell. And that makes you a hypocrite, and an evil hypocrite goes to hell from God. So I 100% agree with that, and quite frankly, if you had two brain cells to rub together, you also would. But we know you don't because you're more interested in this. That's the end of this video. So I hope the rest of you enjoyed that. I know you didn't, Shankz. You're probably going to whinge about this, but it's absolutely factual what I'm saying. And if you were reasonable, logical, and objective, you would 100% agree. Maybe in future, you can figure it out without having to be schooled by me. So anyway, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed that and you learnt something. God bless you all, even you, Mr. Homosexual Shankz. You know, it's none of my business what you do in your bedroom, but if you bring me a question like that, how do I personally feel about your sodomy? I'm going to tell you, personally, I don't like the idea of sodomy. It kind of makes me a little bit sick to my stomach, and I think it is disgusting. So if you don't tell me about it and question me about it, if you just do it behind closed doors and I never find out about it, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. But as soon as you make me answer questions in public like this, guess what? I think it's disgusting, evil, sick, shouldn't do it, bad. So here's an idea. If you're going to do something like that, don't tell me about it. Certainly don't ask me what my opinion is, because it's quite frankly ridiculous. The same as doing it is. So anyway, that's the end of that. Oh yeah, and another thing. You were saying about my Hitchens video. You were saying, oh, I just realised you said benevolent, and what you really meant was malevolent. No, once again, you are blindly, like a stupid lemming, following your own base desires to have a go at Christian, me, but you only quoted half the sentence. I read out Hitchens word for word, and I can even remember off the top of my head what that sentence is. Quote, a horrible form of benevolence. That is what we're talking about here, not benevolence. We're talking about a new inventive form of benevolence, which Mr. Hitchens has created specifically for that point, and I quote, a horrible form of benevolence. Now, what does benevolence mean? It means a predisposed good thing that you're doing for someone else. You're treating them benevolently. You're doing favours and charities for people who are like your children or something like that. Or you're a prime minister. You're doing benevolent management of the town. That is benevolent. A horrible form of benevolent means malevolent. But he didn't say that, did he? He said a horrible form of benevolent. So we still have to use the word he used, benevolent. So I said benevolent. He's describing God as benevolent. But he's describing it as a horrible form. So it is Hitchens that makes the straw man, it is Hitchens that makes the error, and it is you and your blind, lemming-like impulse to try and have a go at me without any leg to stand on that has led you to this error. So that's 2 errors in one video. Thank me later. That's the end of this video. God bless you all, and I'll see you lovely people in the next one. Bye now.